Back for another edition of the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Jeffri Chadiha, NFL Network, NFL.com. Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star. I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. We're talking about who the most influential people are. 10 most influential people for this Chiefs dynasty. 3 championships in 5 years, 4 conference championships in 5 years. Who are the 10 most important people when it comes to building this dynasty? We talk about it right now on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You are listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeffri Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro. Jeffri Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Sam McDowell is the sports columnist for the Kansas City Star. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the Best Chiefs podcast, Jeffri Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro.
Thank you, Curtis. Let's dive right into it, guys. The 10 most influential people when it comes to building this Chiefs dynasty, which Patrcik Mahomes was very adamant as they were interviewing him at the end of the most recent Super Bowl that they're not done, that there's more to come. But where we sit right now, the 10 most influential. We'll go 1 to 10. Jeff, I think number 1, if anybody has anyone else at the top of the list, I might lose my mind, and we may just have a podcast about how we don't agree on the number 1 guy. Who's most on the top 10 list for Jeffri Chadiha?
Andy Reid.
We're going to have a podcast. Who's the most influential?
It's Andy Reid.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay.
How could you not have Andy Reid be the top? Patrcik Mahomes is obviously going to be the next thing I say, but Andy Reid, if you don't hire Andy Reid back in 2013, you're not here. If you don't have the culture established, you don't have the maturation of Travis Kelce, the maturation of Tyreek Hill, you don't have a winning, obviously all the winning that happened before Patrcik Mahomes showed up, and then you plop Patrcik Mahomes in. I know you're going to sit here and say Patrcik Mahomes is the be-all, end-all to everything football-wise, but if Patrcik Mahomes was playing for a different coach, he might be a different player. Might very well be a different player. And so for me, it starts with Andy Reid at number 1.
The tough part of this is it's going to force Trent and I to somehow make anti-Andy Reid arguments.
There you go. Yeah.
But the guy we saw the Chiefs without Patrcik Mahomes and with Andy Reid. It was 1 playoff win in 5 years. Mm-hmm. Like and I do think that I really think that the only person in this entire list you can say there's no chance this would happen is Patrcik Mahomes. He's the only guy on the list you can say there's no chance any of this happens without him. The best Andy Reid argument is maybe they don't draft Patrcik Mahomes unless Andy Reid's
that is
approval. And it's a chain of events, order of operations thing.
That's my point.
I just think that will allow us to continue and give the other 9 names and not just sit here and go to that is the one way I will listen to. You don't have Patrcik Mahomes if you don't have Andy Reid. That there's no way that they made the move that they made in the draft without Andy Reid being completely and fully on board. But from that standpoint, if you listen to what they say, you could put Veach at the top of this list because he's the guy that's credited with being the one that went out and sold Andy Reid on. Yeah, but
hey, sorry, Soren. Or you could argue Pat Mahomes Sr. and Randy Mahomes should be first and second.
Yeah,
I mean, Patrick Mahomes without that.
We agree. There's no. Sam said it. They won 1 playoff game before Patrick Mahomes got here. It is not Andy Reid's.
So you think if you drop Patrick Mahomes into any team in the league, any situation,
Yes.
he would be what he is today?
Yes. It doesn't even matter what comes after you say.
No.
Patrick Mahomes.
Right?
Because that's the argument you're making.
Hold on. I'm sorry. Did you say that he would be what he's been?
What he's become. Yeah.
No. Andy Reid has absolutely nurtured that and helped that. No, I'm not saying he would be what he's become with just any coach. And I don't know that with any other coach he would be what he's become. I think this is the perfect marriage of talent, personality together. But I will tell you that if you put him on any team, yes, they would have significantly improved. He is not a creation of Andy Reid, or he would have stuck his hand up Alex Smith's rear end and puppeted him to championships, and he couldn't do it.
How many games did he play his rookie year?
You don't even want to go down that road, do you?
How many games did he play his rookie year?
You're making my case. Why didn't he play? That was the dumbest thing Andy Reid's ever done.
He wasn't ready to play. He needed to be molded into something.
The best way to ask this question is, how many teams can you put Patrick Mahomes on and he actually wins a Super Bowl? And there's a handful of them.
Okay.
We saw that Andy Reid had never won one without this quarterback. And he had talented quarterbacks that released above league average quarterbacks, never won one. You put Patrick Mahomes with the league average coach, I think there's at least 10 to a dozen guys that he would have won a Super Bowl with by now.
Yes, I agree. And you do save yourself, in my opinion, Jeff, when you talk about, hey, he's the guy that made the move and turned it over to him. That is a fair point. I won't argue that. But Patrick Mahomes is what makes it go.
Well, here's a better way to say it. We're talking about influence. We're not talking about responsibility. If you're talking most responsible, Patrick Mahomes is most responsible for what happened. But influencing it, it's influencing everything. Everything. Right? We just saw Patrick.
I'm not gonna try to talk you out of it anymore. I hear where you're coming from. I think it's valid. I mean, is it the guy who presses the button or the weapon that destroys the opposition? I mean, I hear what you're saying.
You don't get Jesus Christ without God, right?
There's what?
You don't get Jesus Christ without God, right?
Well, let's put God number one on this list.
God never wanted anything before Jesus Christ showed up.
Listen, it's Mahomes all day. I'm fine with, they're 1-2, right? I have Mahomes Reid. You have Mahomes Reid, right, McDowell?
Yeah. I'm arguing against the number 2 on my list.
I know. I just we've seen Bill Belichick without Tom Brady. It's Tom Brady. We've seen Andy Reid, and listen, I'm a believer that Andy Reid is a strong candidate to be the greatest coach of all time. But more important than the greatest coach of all time is the greatest quarterback of all time. And Patrick Mahomes is making a strong case to be that guy. Quarterback trumps coach. It's the only thing that trumps coach. It's the only thing that trumps Andy Reid here, but it trumps him. It trumps him. That's I think we agree to disagree. And we
I don't think it's I think it's 1A, 1B. I don't think it's definitive. I have no problem with people picking Patrick Mahomes first. But I think the way I look at it is
I just people, Bruce Arians with Brady, without Brady. Bill Belichick with Brady, without Brady. Andy Reid with Patrick Mahomes, without Patrick Mahomes. It's pretty clear to me. All right, well, let's go. Maybe we'll have some drama then at number 3. Since we're all the same 1-2. Where do you go at 3 then, Jeff?
Oh, let's see. 3, I have Steve Spagnuolo. Steve Spagnuolo. Because I changed my list a few times. Steve Spagnuolo.
Okay.
And for not all the same reasons, but you could argue that they don't have at least 2 championships without Steve Spagnuolo as their defensive coordinator. Certainly they don't have any. I mean, Bob Sutton was such a train wreck at the end of his run here as defensive coordinator that he was preventing Patrick Mahomes from being what you're saying he's been in this organization. So it just goes to show you that bringing in a competent defensive mind, an imaginative defensive mind, taking a lot of the same players and turning them loose with Spagnuolo, what it meant to this team's dynastic run is just about everything. I don't think that they may have won, but I don't think they have anything more without Steve Spagnuolo calling the defensive plays.
Okay, Sam.
Yeah, I guess I don't know exactly which way I want to do this, but I'll say like Spags is in my top 5 for the reasons that Jeff mentioned. There's only so many guys you can say one of these Super Bowls is probably subtracted without this person, and I do think this last year that Spags is on that list for this last season. And like the upgrade from Bob Sutton, like Bob Sutton had 3 top 10 defenses in Kansas City, 2 top 3 defenses in Kansas City. It wasn't the complete dunce that people made him out to be. He was the wrong guy for the personnel that they end up having. But like,
it was definitely going the wrong direction.
It's going the wrong direction. Absolutely. Like they had to make that move. My point is, I think Spags replaced a more talented person than people gave him credit for, even as it was completely going in the wrong direction, and he wasn't the right guy for the right era for that era. But third on my list is Travis Kelce. I mean, he's actually what's most interesting about having Kelce here is he's the guy that we're actually going to test this at some point. And that test could be coming sooner rather than later to see what the Chiefs are like without him. But when you go through the Chiefs in the past 5 years, as you do this exercise, there's not a lot of people that have been here for all 3 of them, particularly on the player side. Yeah. And we've seen this team in games without Travis Kelce, and it's tough. And I just think that he's one of the reasons I elevated him. I think he's probably in all of our top 10. Certainly, I would hope so. But I do think the leadership stuff matters too, and so that's why I've improved him maybe a spot or 2 up to number 3 because he was the holdover from the Andy Reid pre-Patrick Mahomes era.
By the way, we're proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's best. For 30 years, they've been solving parking lot problems. If you got a problem in your parking lot, all you need to do is call Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Like I said, since 1994, they've solved those problems. Call 816-484-3338. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. One contractor, all things parking lot, whether it's the bumpers, the signage, seal coating, striping, you name it, they do it. Building it from scratch. Gann Asphalt and Concrete lets you focus on your business. Just call Gann Asphalt and Concrete today at 816-484-3338. Number 3 on my list, I don't know, Jeff, how you can put Andy Reid on the Patrick Mahomes and not take the guy who was supposedly down and scouted him and has now put all the talent on the field. And that's Brett Veach. I'm going to put Brett
he
Veach.
Put all the talent on the field?
He put all the talent on the field.
Yeah, he got Travis Kelce and Chris Jones. He got guys.
All but 2. All but
Tyreek Hill.
That's fair.
Yeah.
He put L'Jarius Sneed. He did put all the talent on the field, save 2 guys for the last 2 championships. Right? He was instrumental in the Patrick Mahomes.
That's like saying Jerry Krause put all the guys on the field except Jordan and Pippen.
He drafted Pippen.
I'm just saying. I'm just being metaphorical. I get that he did do that.
Yeah. But I know. I think it's a fair point. But I do think that it is underrated, the roster construction and the cap management that's gone on. And I know they lost Brant Tillis, who was kind of their cap guy. And we're going to see how it moves forward. But that he put together that staff. And I think all you got to do is look back at his first draft and see when he had to reorganize everything when John Dorsey was sent out. There's no doubt Dorsey did a fantastic job, and John Dorsey rightfully gets credit for drafting Patrick Mahomes. But we know what's been said a lot that, the boots on the ground guy was Brett Veach, and being involved in that decision is giant. And I think he has done an underrated job of continuing to put talent around and continuing to keep Chris Jones in the mix and make it work with another big contract. Cap management is really important, and they've been pretty good at it. And that comes under his watch. I also think guys like L'Jarius Sneed, getting a 10-sack guy at pick number 32, it's not easy because see what they did with Felix Anudike-Uzomah the next year. I think Brett Veach is number 3 on my list. I'll put him 3rd. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting to hear where Jeff puts him.
Well, I'll jump in, Stren, just because he's 4th on my list, and I think we've all done number 3. So I've got Veach 4th, and I would just, beyond echoing what you said, point out that before these last 2 Super Bowls, no team had won a Super Bowl with the quarterback that had occupied more than 13% of the salary cap, and they did it with Mahomes at 17 and then at 16.9. And look, Mahomes is a major reason for that, but we've seen really talented quarterbacks in the league that hadn't done it, and that had to have the quarterback in the Tom Brady era sacrifice money so they could formulate a top 10 defense. And like Brett Veach has not been like when he formed a top 5 defense last year, it wasn't because he had the cap money to do it. And the top 5 defense has nothing to do with the quarterback. it's the fact that he not only drafted well despite having terrible draft position, but also he signed 3 veterans that were impactful last year. And the major reason I think he's got to be on everyone's top 5 is he set the tone for the long-term future of this culture when he traded Tyreek Hill, a move that a lot of GMs in this league would not have had the guts to do.
Okay. Jeff, who's your number 4?
Number 4, Chris Jones.
Okay, interesting.
Stone cold.
Okay.
And probably this was a tough one because I thought about putting Kelce above him, but then I thought about all the big games, big moments Chris Jones has had. Hadn't had the productivity over his career that rivals what Travis has done, but certainly the first Super Bowl, the last Super Bowl, the AFC Championship game 2 years ago against the Bengals when he had 3-4 sacks or whatever it was and dominated the Bengals offensive line. He has shown up when they needed him most in the biggest of games. And so for my money, I think that matters more than what Travis has done over the course of his career. And Travis is the next on my list, but without Chris Jones in those moments, they don't have 3 rings.
Okay. So we don't add a new one because I'm not sure who's going to be number 4. Well, I do know number 4 is Brett Veach on yours. I'll finish mine up. I have Steve Spagnuolo at number 4, and I think that's going to be number 5 for Sam. It sounds like, because you said
top 5. I've got him at number 5 for me.
For all the reasons Jeff said, and I think, with Andy Reid, to make it work with Andy Reid, you've got to be able to handle everything on defense, because Andy Reid, I don't think, has any interest in doing that. I think he does a great job on the head coaching part, but he's not a guy that's like, okay, I'm going to leave my offensive meeting and go over here and help out and do this. I'm sure he helps on the defense. I'm sure there's schematic, and his offensive mind would be a great help to any defensive coordinator, but I think it's pretty clear. The defense is one guy's show, and it wasn't going to work. They could have got 1 or 2 if they're going to go on to have 5 or 6 or 7. They might have had 1 right now because they just out offensed everybody, but they've actually had to play some defense in all these games. They've all been close. They've needed stops in all their Super Bowls. They've needed stops at times. And even, Steve Spagnuolo has been a critical piece. And I think it's ridiculous that he has not been made a head coach in this league. Great for Chiefs fans, but ridiculous. Steve Spagnuolo at 4 for me. And you've got Spags at 5 for you.
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
And he has been a head coach. He just wasn't a second opportunity to be a head coach.
Okay. Who do you so you have Travis Kelce at 5, you said?
He is 5 for me. Yep.
Okay. He's 5 for me as well. And I just think having that go-to Batman and Robin connection, and I think his personality, his energy, I think there's a lot to what he brings to the team, to the personality. That's the only word I can come up with. I wish I could, if I need a thesaurus here, but his personality does, I think, inject fun and make it tolerable. It's a long NFL season, and you need a guy that always makes it fun, and he's energetic. I like Travis Kelce for number 5 as well for me, and I think you've got to have, every great quarterback had somebody they slung it to. Travis Kelce is the go-to guy that keeps the chains moving, and that's an important part of the equation for this team. All right, so we're through 5, right?
That's right. Only one fight. Only one big fight so far.
Only one big fight. I don't think anybody has a problem with anything. Chris Jones is the lone name that has been said. Do you have a fresh name, Sam, for number 6?
No, Chris Jones is my number 6.
It's my number 6 as well.
Yeah.
So that's not adding a new.
But,
so it looks
like the one thing that's still a mystery is, where does Jeff have? I mean, are we getting to Brett Veach now at number 6, or?
You want to know?
Well, yes, I do want to know. What are we getting to?
No, we're not getting to Brett Veach.
Oh my goodness!
We're getting to the guy he used to work for, John Dorsey.
Okay.
Who drafted Patrcik Mahomes? Who drafted Chris Jones? Who drafted Travis Kelce? Who drafted Tyreek Hill? I mean, what are we talking about here?
All right.
I love what Brett Veach has done, and I'll give you that he has done a tremendous job. Throughout the whole run here as GM, he's done a tremendous job. But you're not winning those championships without those 4 players being in the fold. Everybody else we're talking about here is interchangeable, and we've seen that. But to go find Tyreek Hill in the 5th round, Travis Kelce in the 3rd round, Chris Jones in the 2nd round, and to make the deal to get Patrick Mahomes, who, by the way, I'll say this again, if they didn't have Andy Reid with him and they didn't draft him, he'd probably be Josh Allen right now. A guy with tremendous talent and no rings. And so you got to set the table. You got to go out and find players. John Dorsey has drafted 4 Hall of Famers.
I will say, look, this Kansas City Chiefs fans, I think, have revisionist history when it comes to the fact that, which GM was in place when Patrick Mahomes was drafted. Having said that, Brett Veach is 90+% responsible for the reason Patrick Mahomes is in the building. And I recognize that John Dorsey ultimately has to make that decision. But, from all the stories I've heard over the years, that is a Brett Veach draft pick. And
people act like John Dorsey was sitting there playing Fortnite. Who do you want me to take?
Well, I mean, Brett Veach is in the end convincing Andy Reid, not convincing John Dorsey, that this is who they need to draft. And I do think once that materialized, there's a reason why Brett Veach. I don't know if Brett Veach does not identify Patrick Mahomes if they even get rid of John Dorsey later that offseason. I think that all plays into the fact that
he wasn't playing in Sri Lanka. He was playing in the Big 12. You're telling me John Dorsey never saw Patrick Mahomes play football?
He saw him play. I don't know if he saw him play as much as he let on. But I mean, it was a Brett Veach draft pick. And look, I understand John Dorsey be on the list. I consider putting him 10th on my list because, I mean, the guy was a great scout. But I can't pick John Dorsey above Brett Veach.
I can't either. And you and I have Chris Jones, and the fun seems to be with the list of Jeffri Chadiha. So you and I have Chris Jones at 6, correct?
All right. Let's
just have Jeff go through his top 10, and we'll just debate his top 10.
Who's the best player? Who's the best player Veach drafted?
Patrick Mahomes.
Okay. Who's the best player that we know he actually drafted? Not that he identified.
Probably L'Jarius Sneed.
Okay. So he is where on the list of players?
I disagree with you, but not nearly to the degree that I disagreed on the Patrick Mahomes. I have John Dorsey on my list for what it's worth. We'll get to that here in a minute, but I have John Dorsey on my list because you can't draft Chris Jones. And listen, this dynasty started with mostly all John Dorsey guys. So I think he's absolutely a part of the equation. I'm not against it, but I do listen. He was fired for a reason. There was a problem there. Whatever it is, even if it's if you're here's the thing, even if it's just because he was pissing Andy Reid off, you can't put Andy Reid number 1 and then have a guy that had to go because of Andy Reid ahead of the guy that Andy Reid said, this is the guy I can work with.
Now we're talking about it. Doug Collins was fired before the Bulls dynasty took off. Mark Jackson was fired before the Warriors dynasty took off. That didn't make them lesser people. Just bad timing. They still were a big part of what.
No, if Andy Reid, if Patrick Mahomes, Dan Reeves was a problem. Not getting along with John Elway was a problem. When you get Patrick Mahomes in, I think Eric Bieniemy started to become a problem, and he's not in Kansas City anymore. And so your ability to work with 1A and 1B, if we want to call them that, is important. And John Dorsey did not work with them. And for whatever reason, and it may be because they're insecure individuals. I don't know. I have no idea. But I know it was clear that they were moving on from John Dorsey, and that is a problem. And so that alone means he can't be above Brett Veach.
The John Dorsey contracts include Justin Houston, Eric Berry, who were there playing for years after those guys were gone. I just think this have to pay the quarterback era, which is once they obviously, graduate beyond their rookie contract. I don't think we're still talking about this being a dynasty with what I said earlier with Patrick Mahomes occupying 17% of the salary cap, because I think that exposes his weakness of paying 30-plus-year-old stars, even non-stars. I mean, it was evident to people that the decline of some of these guys would come beyond 30, 32 years old. The Chiefs were still paying $8 million to Eric Berry like 2 years after he's retired. I don't think this era would have suited John Dorsey's skill set, even as I think the guy is tremendous at scouting players.
As the Chiefs are just paying Travis Kelce more money and Chris Jones more money into their 30s.
Well, I mean, I think the hope is that Chris Jones is playing at a high level. I mean, I think it's a dangerous contract. I don't know that it's one that I would have done, but we're going to find out. Chris Jones wouldn't have been here or up to me for any of these 3 championships. I would have dealt him a long time ago, and he's proven to be a high caliber player for much longer than I would have had. And so I might look like a fool. Brett Veach made that decision to go ahead and sign him and pay him, and has made it work with them. And to Sam's point, the Eric Berry contract and Justin Houston contracts were not good ones.
Yeah. Hey, and to go back to my Andy Reid point, who hired Brett Veach?
Andy Reid.
Yeah, I mean,
if you look at the lineage, I think
that's what I just said. Who hired him? Andy Reid.
Well, and
who got Brett Veach? Who got Patrick Mahomes all of a sudden?
Right.
Look at that.
All right, well, who do you have 7?
Brett Veach.
Okay, you do have Brett Veach. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Everything you said. Look, when you make a top 10 list, people think that people low on the list are getting sure thrift. Not the case. It's really hard to pick. You're splitting hairs here. But the last 2 have certainly been, he's played a bigger role than in the first one. And I still think they're not winning any championships without Mahomes, Kelce, Hill, Jones. But the people he's brought in, rebuilding the offensive line.
They have one, just because I know somebody's sitting there right now bouncing off the wall. They have one too without Tyreek Hill.
Yes, I'm saying he's a big part of it.
Yeah, yes and no. So like Tyreek is 7th on my list because they win one with him, but they win 2 others because of what they recoup from his talents.
Yes.
And so they do win twice without Tyreek Hill. And now the bottom half of, I think, of a lot of our lists are going to be kind of the star players of one championship, or maybe, a big time player, but maybe not the star player of multiple titles. But like, they win because of the assets they recoup for Tyreek Hill in the last 2. He's the guy that I still think has a piece of all 3, even if he wasn't on the roster for all 3.
Tyreek Hill is not 7 on my list, but I'll go ahead and talk about him here. He is obviously on my list. I assume he's on yours as well. If he's 8, tell us he's 8.
He's 8.
All right, he's 8 on yours. So we'll have our Tyreek Hill discussion here. He's not. He is 8. I'll tell you on mine. He's not 7 on mine. I'll get to my 7 in a second. But Tyreek Hill is giant because I think not only does Tyreek Hill all the production that he brought to the team, but also he taught Patrick Mahomes what's possible. Right? Like, I do think the idea of John Dorsey, and both Brett Veach get credit for this because bringing in Sammy Watkins didn't live up to his contract, but he gave Patrick Mahomes the weapons to push the envelope. What can I do at the quarterback position? And when, maybe Justin Fields would be an entirely different quarterback if the Bears had weapons everywhere and protection for him to throw it all around. Tyreek Hill's ability showed Patrick Mahomes what's possible, and gave him the ability to become confident, to become comfortable, and to send the ball down the field and not live in a little bubble. Like Brady Quinn, I've never seen anybody so allergic to throwing the ball more than 5 yards than the little window I got of Brady Quinn quarterbacking the Chiefs. But I wonder what it would have been if he'd had a weapon like Tyreek Hill, who not only was fast, but would go up and fight for the ball, could adjust for the ball, could do all those things. He allowed Patrick Mahomes' growth to really continue. And I think that's why Tyreek Hill is more than just the one championship that he was a part of. He is a part of the development of making Patrick Mahomes the quarterback that he is.
Your best point to that, Stren, is the fact that Alex Smith completed the most deep passes in the NFL in 2017, the year with Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, he brought Alex Smith out of his bubble. So, yeah. Anything else on Tyreek Hill? We all agree.
Just that he saved them a ton of draft capital because he developed into a receiver. They have to go out and find guys and pay big money to guys. He was a cheap bargain for a long time for what he was.
Yeah, and he exceeded their expectation. If they'd have known what he was going to be, they wouldn't have had him returning kicks to get things started. But he did it, and then they quickly went, "Oh, wait a minute, this guy can actually play wideout." I remember watching him in the preseason game his rookie year against the Bears, and they sent a ball deep, and he didn't track it, and not at all. And so he turned himself into a guy who could track the ball, which we've talked about on other podcasts about other receivers that can't do it. McCole Hardman's who can't do it, who have the speed but can't get deep. And maybe it was just one bad pass, and they knew that from things they'd scouted. But I remember against the Bears game, they went deep, and he was kind of lost on it. And he immediately made himself a great wide receiver. So, yeah, tremendous. Work ethic, too. I mean, running all the time in practice, being healthy, playing through injuries, limping across the field after the 4th and 15 catch against the Baltimore Ravens. Everything you could want other than some off-the-field drama, obviously. But on the football field and in the practice field, what more could you have asked for?
So who's 7th on your list then, Stren? If he's
Number 7 on my list is Clark Hunt, because I don't think every owner
practice facilities, yeah.
I'll give you a reason. Like, first of all, I'm gonna tell you one. I think as an owner, he stays out of the way, and I think it's important. Owners can screw things up, and they can get their hands in the middle of it. And Jerry Jones is a better football mind than people give him credit for, but he screws things up. Clark Hunt stays out of the way. He doesn't get in the middle of things. Signs all the checks. He doesn't sign the checks as big as he could. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I'd like to see him lose a little more money in some years to make it work, to put more cash up front. But he is fun to the team. And I'll tell you the other thing he did. I don't think every owner stays the course with Tyreek Hill. I don't think every owner, like when the Tyreek Hill thing blew up, I think a lot of owners would have cut bait and run. And I think if you cut bait and run on him, you maybe don't win the first one. And if you don't win the first one, I don't know that the other ones follow right behind. And so I think Clark Hunt, one, having enough, whether it's confidence, whatever it is, being willing to stay out of the way and let the big boys do what they need to do, is a very underrated part of the equation. And I think he tolerated the Tyreek Hill drama. He's dealt with Frank Clark. I know what you're going to say. Well, they're winning and he's making money.
Yeah.
That's right. He is. But the goal is we're talking about who's responsible for the dynasty, and there are owners that wouldn't have stayed the course on that.
So I almost consider like Clark Hunt was
and he hired Andy Reid.
That's what I was gonna say. You missed.
Nobody else did. He tried the GM first thing, said that didn't work, and he adjusted and said, "I got to get the coach right." And he hired Andy Reid.
Yeah.
And that means he has to be on the top 10.
Yeah, really found a no-brainer. That was his hiring. Andy Reid was like hiring, I don't know who is the best. Nick Saban. It's like
I disagree.
I got a choice.
I disagree.
It's not like he was like an unproven coach. The guy, but in the Super Bowl.
I disagree. Then Bill Belichick would be coaching this year.
Well, Bill Belichick's older. Andy Reid was what, 50-something when he showed up here?
It's still.
If Bill Belichick was 50-something, he'd have a job right now.
I mean, the best thing about Clark Hunt is he doesn't let Andy Reid get on the plane to go to Arizona and compete for him. Like, he prevents that from being a competition. That's the reason he almost cracked my top 10. And Stren, you do make a good point that not meddling in every little move is also helpful. But like, we all know that while there's a salary cap, there's also a cash cap for a lot of teams, and the Chiefs are not stretching that salary cap the way they could, that cash cap the way they could be. And that's what prevented me from actually putting him on the top 10.
Okay. So Clark Hunt doesn't make anybody else's top 10?
No.
Okay. All right. Who's then? So for me, you had, so that's 7. I've got Tyreek Hill 8. You've got Tyreek Hill 8, Jeff, right? So who's 8 on your list, Jeff? Or Sam?
Yeah, I think I've got some that may or may not be on your guys' list, but I've got Tyron Mathieu number 8 because I thought when they made the switch at defensive coordinator, and this is what I was trying to illustrate earlier with the Bob Sutton point, is Bob Sutton was not good at his job the last couple of years in Kansas City, but it prevented people from talking about the fact that the personnel was really bad too those past couple of years on defense. And that required not just better talent, but a complete culture shift, I thought, in the locker room on the defensive side of the football. You guys went into that locker room before. It was offense versus defense at times when you walked into that place. And I think Tyron Mathieu's locker's right across from Patrcik Mahomes. He was part of the thing where it just became the Kansas City Chiefs, not the Chiefs offense and the Chiefs defense. And by the way, I mean, he's a teacher. The guy's going to be a coach when he retired. I don't know what level. But I think he's part of the reason for the acceleration of some of their defensive backs, guys like L'Jarius Sneed who played with them. So he's 8th on my list.
Yeah, okay. He's 9th on my list.
Okay.
But to me, he is, and Kansas City fans know this, he is the James Shields of the Chiefs.
Great analogy.
He's the guy who walked in here and showed them it's not just about showing up and practicing and thinking you're going to be good. Here's how you get good. And I think he changed a whole, not just, obviously what Sam mentioned is right, but just that defense needed to have a personality, needed to have an identity, needed to have something of a foundation because there were a lot of young players on there and a lot of the leaders had gone. Chris Jones was not what he'd become. And so I remember asking Andy Reid at that year's owners meetings, who's your leaders now that you've gotten rid of all these guys? And he said Tyron Mathieu, the first name he said. And it turned out he was right. So Tyron Mathieu wasn't here forever, but I think just as James Shields did for the Royals, he set them on a course that allowed them to become what they became as far as knowing they could be a part of helping this team win championships, not just being along for the ride.
Love that analogy. That's a great analogy.
It is a great analogy. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete with free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt and Concrete can keep your parking lot safe, helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Why would you call anybody else? Celebrating 30 years solving parking lot problems in Kansas City better than anybody else. Find them online right now at GannAsphalt.com. One contractor, all things parking lot. We're talking about Gann Asphalt and Concrete. I've got John Dorsey at number 9 on my list. So we're through 9 for Jeff and I. That brings us to number 9 for you, Sam.
All right. Well, I know this guy's not on your list. I have Houston Texans coach Bill O'Brien at number 9 on my list because the hardest one to win.
No Clark Hunt, but we'll put Bill O'Brien on.
The hardest one to win. I've got to put at least one tongue-in-cheek one on my list.
Yeah.
The hardest one to win is the first one. And he told his own team when they're up 24-7, we've got to play desperate. And I don't know how that game turns out if he doesn't call a fake punt in his own territory to Justin Reid, a defensive back, up 24-7. So that's the one I thought that's the most losable game they've ever had during this dynasty, and Bill O'Brien won it.
They won by 20. What was it? 50.
You knew the game was over. You knew the game was over when he called that fake punt. You knew the game was over when he
started to get excited. You did not know the game was over.
So Bill O'Brien. Where's Bill on your list, Soren?
Bill O'Brien did not make my list. Not even a consideration. I'll give you credit. It's creative. I'll give you that. But no, not on my list. Bill O'Brien, not on my list. All right, Jeff, you've created the most drama here. We'll let you lead with the last one.
I'm going to go with Ryan Pace, which follows Sam's logic here. And if people don't know who you're kind of confused there, Soren. You know who Ryan Pace is?
Yeah. Trubisky over Mahomes. Yeah,
that's right. He's the Bears general manager who chose Mitch Trubisky over Patrick Mahomes. And in fact, you could put John Lynch in there, and you could probably put a few other people in there. But Ryan Pace needed a quarterback, the second overall pick, and decided that Mitch Trubisky. Apparently, he was scouting someplace other than with the Big 12 either for quarterback.
He's with John Dorsey. Yeah, he's with John Dorsey. Yeah,
that's right. But Mitch Trubisky could have been. I don't know if the Chiefs would have drafted him, but obviously Mahomes could have been a Chicago Bear. And for everything we just said here, believe me, if he was in Chicago with that group, his career would not be where it is today.
That is a fair point. All right, number 10 on your list, Sam.
Yeah, this was a tough one. I mean, I did include I considered Clark Hunt, considered Frank Clark because he's had 7.5 sacks in 2 of the Super Bowl playoff runs. I think you could make an argument for position coach like Dave Merritt or like Alex Smith, kind of help tutoring Mahomes. John Dorsey, obviously. I went with the boring option, but I went with Jerry Sneed. I think that the defense is the reason that they were good last year, and I think he was a player as responsible as any other. We mentioned on a previous podcast that I thought they were allowed to blitz a ton because of Jerry Sneed last year. They were just effective in so many ways. He's also here for multiple. And again, similar argument to Tyreek Hill, he's got a lasting effect. They do recoup a draft pick out of him that could potentially, wind up on this list in the future. So I've got him because he's a key part of 2, and you get something for him in the end when he leaves too.
Who was the Bengals general manager in 2017, Jeff?
Well, it's the same guys. Mike Brown pretty much makes all the picks over there. The guy who runs their personnel department is Duke Tobin.
Duke Tobin or Mike Brown would be worthy candidates for taking John Ross, one pick in front of Patrick Mahomes. That would be a worthy candidate.
Yep.
I'll put into the mix of this one. I'm going to go with a name, and I thought of a number of the names. Tyron Mathieu's name came up. Frank Clark's name came up. L'Jarius Sneed's name came up. Mitchell Schwartz's name came up. I thought his brilliance at right tackle was just absolutely fantastic. And giving them one side, it allowed Eric Fisher to be just a good, very good offensive tackle and everybody to quit losing their mind. Because if you needed help on that side, we got to help out the number one guy because Mitchell Schwartz was so good on the right side. So I want to get his name in for a mention. I thought he was just great.
It's telling we don't have any offensive linemen on the entire list. None of the three of us do, though.
Well, and what drew me away is like they've all come and gone.
Exactly.
Right? They've continued to win without any of them. All of them played a role, but none of them have been vital.
Andy Reid.
I wanted to, number 2 on my list. I really hate him. I wanted to a little bit of like go with something a little bit different than just picking a name. So as I understand it, conversations that I've had in getting Andy Reid, who I think is instrumental in making it all happen. I do think the relationship that Mark Donovan had with Andy Reid is an underrated and an untold story that I think one day will be told, because I don't know. There was a plane. Let's be honest. This wasn't like, Andy Reid was a done deal to Kansas City all along. We know that wasn't the case. They met with Andy Reid at an airport in Philadelphia with the Cardinal plane sitting outside of the room that they were meeting, right? Bluff, maybe, I don't know. But the Cardinals were ready to pick him up and fly him to Arizona. He was also supposed to go to talk to the Chargers. And that meeting continued. Now, listen, I put Clark Hunt on my list, and I stand by my statement there. I also don't think Clark Hunt's the most dynamic individual. I think he leads by hiring good people and letting them do their job, not because Clark Hunt came in and gave some sales pitch that made it happen. I don't think Clark Hunt can convince Andy Reid because everybody was going to pay Andy Reid. Because to Jeff's point, I think he was the no-brainer, but you were talking about a guy that Philadelphia wanted him gone, and he had a really bad season his last year. And it kind of looked like, it was more Donovan McNabb than it was Andy Reid, which we know now was not the case. But that was the kind of the talk that was there. It even persisted in Kansas City when he started 1-5 after not making the playoffs in his second year. But Mark Donovan was there, and Mark Donovan worked with him. And I know that there was a relationship between those two. And I believe it to be very instrumental in getting Andy Reid there. I also think what he does, the business side, when you decide to divide up the Carl Peterson job, and Mark Donovan preceded Andy Reid, and you wanted a football guy to do football and a business guy to do business. If you had a slappy business guy or a business guy that wanted to suddenly be a GM, and Mark Donovan played football for Brown and was in the Giants training camp, so he knows football, right? He has a football mind. And I know a lot of people on the business side that want to make themselves GMs, want to sit around and they waste football guys' times, talking football with them and all that bullshit. That doesn't happen with Mark Donovan. He knows football, but he knows his lane. And I think we'll find that he was a bigger part of the equation to getting Andy Reid to come here than people realize. So Mark Donovan's number 10 on my list.
Yeah, I actually considered Mark Donovan, and I think I would have put him on my list had Clark Hunt, if he does spend the extra money in that cash cap I'm talking about, if he did increase his cap budget, because like Mark Donovan has increased the Chiefs' profits, he's taken advantage of the Patrick Mahomes era. The Chiefs international games that we're going to be seeing almost every time that they've got the 9th home game is a cash cow. And like Mark Donovan saw that at a time when a lot of the rest of the league thought they didn't even bid on these international territories. And they saw what the Chiefs did with Germany. And now there's other territories that are opening up. Every team wants in. Mark Donovan was one of the team presidents that saw that first. So I do think he's generated cash for the organization in a way that a lot of team presidents would not have seen. Having said that, Clark Hunt doesn't always spend that money on the field. If he did, I think you'd have to have Mark Donovan on your top 10.
Yeah, and we'll see what ends up happening with the stadium as well, and maybe they end up spending a lot more now whenever we get Plan B. I know, Sam, you'll be at the tip of the spear in covering that because you did a brilliant job in covering the losing proposition that was out there. So we'll see where it goes. Listen, if you want to win when it comes to your parking lot, Gann Asphalt and Concrete, your only choice. As I mentioned, every single project comes with a written warranty. Been doing it for 30 years in Kansas City since 1994. Find them online right now at GannAsphalt.com. That's GannAsphalt.com, or call them at 816-484-3338. Great KC company serving this city, this community, and businesses all over town for 30 years. So thank you to Gann Asphalt and Concrete for being a part of the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. For Jeffri Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold,